So we're going to go ahead and begin with a little bit of introduction as to what Grow with Google is. It's an initiative where some of Google's training tools and resources are shared with the public so that they can grow in their careers and skills. And a lot of the focus of this series has been business owners, entrepreneurs, or those who are interested in starting their own business. So although the series will help anyone and everyone learn lots of tools and skills, the target is mainly for those interested in small business. But you can use all of these tools and applications that Google has to offer in your work and in your personal life as well, even though the target is really for business owners. So we're going to start with communicate with Calendar and Gmail. And I'm going to talk for just a moment about what we're going to cover today, a little bit of an agenda. So what we're going to do is we're going to see what are the steps to create and share a new calendar, and that would be a calendar inside of Google Calendar. Then we're going to talk for a bit about adding an event to the calendar, and our event is going to be a meeting. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Then we're going to go over the steps to receive and accept invitations inside of Gmail, and these would be event invitations, and we'll look at that in a few minutes. And then the last thing that we're going to cover is how to create an email signature in Gmail. So Gmail being Google Mail. Now what I'm going to talk about for just the first step, the first thing that I cover in all of the webinars and workshops in this Grow with Google series, the first thing I share with you, and we won't take very long on this, but many of you may already have a Google account. Many of you may already have the Google account and the Gmail that you use. Now, if you have a Google account already, then you already have a Gmail. We're going to walk through the steps about that in a little bit. But in order to have a Google account or to create another Google account, let's walk through those steps. So the first thing we're going to do is share with you that all you need for this whole process, all you need is access to internet and a device. So you can have a laptop, a personal computer, desktop, you can have a tablet, a smartphone. One of the things I recommend is that for the purposes of what we're working on in these workshops, and when you're practicing, we'll talk about that in a bit, I would recommend something with a larger screen than a smartphone, if at all possible, because you're going to want to be able to have a little more screen space than a smartphone. So the first thing you're going to do is you have internet access on your device, and you're going to launch your browser, and preferably for all these Google tools, it would be Google Chrome as your internet browser navigator. This will work on other browsers, but we recommend Google Chrome. It's just a much smoother process for using Google tools. So you're launching, and you started a new web page, and you went to Google. Just pretend you're doing a Google search. So what you see on the screen that I'm sharing with you, what you'll see is the red arrow in the upper right corner, and that's 9 dots, and that's the apps launcher. So whenever you see anywhere is talking about the Google Apps Launcher, it's the little square of 9 dots. So you're going to select there. Now these steps are if you don't have an account. As you can see on the upper right-hand corner, it says sign in. So you would sign in for practice. But right now we're talking about those who do not have a Google account or choose to create a brand new one, because this is all free of cost. Okay, so if you wanted to create a new Google account or you do not have one, those are the steps that we're doing right now. So now what you're going to do is this would take you to the next screen. And what you're going to do is when you select those 9 dots, it's going to give you this menu. And I placed my nice red arrow. You'll see a lot of those red arrows. I placed my red arrow on the account. Okay, so that icon or that image that I'm pointing to on the screen I'm sharing with you is for you to access your Google account. Now, before I continue, I am going to share with you that following this workshop, in the next day or two, you're going to receive in the email you used to register, you're going to receive a file. And the file is a handout that has all of the slides and information that I'm sharing with you today. So you do not have to memorize everything as we get further in this workshop, or stress that maybe you forgot something that I showed on the screen, because that's one of the advantages of registering for this workshop, is that with your email, you're going to receive handouts that are these slides. It's going to show you every step that I'm sharing on my screen today. Okay. Now, this next screen that I'm showing you is basically what happens when you want to create the Google account. You select create a Google account. Okay, so that would be the step that you would take there. Now, I have a little graphic here that's doing it automatically, so you can kind of take a look and see what happens. So you sign in, and that's how you sign into your account. So that is something that if you already have a Google account, you've probably done many times. So let's continue. And as we continue, I want to let you know that as we go along, please feel free to type into that Q&A, that question and answer section you have at the bottom of your screen, into there, that Q&A section, question and answer. If you type in any of your questions, I will address them in the workshop today. I will address your questions, so please feel comfortable typing questions. If I don't answer them immediately, then I will answer them along the way throughout or at the close of the workshop. So please, as you have questions, go ahead and type them in, okay? What we're looking at now is that the first thing we're going to do is we are going to sign in, but also before we go and look at the calendar, I want you to know that signing in to the Google account gives you access to all the tools. So once you sign in to your Google account, everything you see that's available, all these images, all these icons that you see that I'm sharing with you on the screen, account, search, maps, YouTube, all of these are available to you. So you can switch back and forth. Once you sign in, that gives you access once you're inside of your Google account. So as we move forward, let's take a look. I have placed on the screen an image where now you see all the different choices, and I placed a nice red square around calendar. That's Google Calendar. And that's the first thing that we're going to work with today, and we're going to select. So one of the things that I'll repeat is that I highly recommend that you're attending this workshop today, that you would get the handout following this workshop and practice as we continue to add to the things that I'm going to describe, the tools that I'm going to talk about. I highly recommend that you practice these steps as I share them with you, and as when you receive your handout as well. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, remember, we selected Google Calendar. What that's going to do is that's going to bring you to a screen that looks a lot like what I'm sharing with you. The only difference is if you look on the upper right-hand corner, there's a purple circle for mine, and it's got the letter G inside of it, and that's just because I named my demonstration, my demo account, Grow with Google. So that's why it's placing a G there, and yours would definitely be different. But the rest of the screen would be quite similar. So I'm bringing up my calendar. It's March 2021. Things on the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this one step at a time. The first step is that we are going to create a calendar. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to select create. I placed a red box around it just to be visible to you. Okay. So now, let's see what happens next. Okay, I created a calendar. Now, one of the things that we will want to look at, there we go. One of the things we'll want to look at is if you have a personal Google account. If you have a personal Google account, you may want to sit back and think, is this a personal Google account or is this my business Google account? Personal or business? Do I have a these are the choices as you're making your plans as to how you want to move forward. Do I want to use my personal account, business account, and then maybe a business account? You can have multiple Google accounts is what I'm saying. You just want to keep that personal separate from that business as we start to move forward with calendars. And that's very important because if you start to, you have so many things going on in your day, you're very, very busy. Here you're sitting and participating in a workshop, but throughout a very, very busy day, you may be running and doing all these tasks and work tasks and personal tasks. You do not want to make the mistake of accidentally combining material that belongs on your business calendar, because in a few steps later, we're going to see how you are going to have sharing your calendar. So you want to make sure that you decide, okay, I have a personal account, but my calendar needs to be business calendar, work calendar, a calendar that you're sharing with others and you're comfortable with them seeing all the tasks and the different things you have each day. So to make sure you get that done properly, here's what we recommend. We recommend that you create a new calendar. Just create a brand new calendar. And how are we going to do that? Take a look at your screen. At the bottom, you see where I have other calendars, So what we will do is we are going to select other calendars. Remember to type in any questions you may have, okay? So here we have, there's going to be a lot of things on the next slide. Okay. Here we have, I have it, actually, this isn't the very busy slide. The busy slide is the one that follows this one. This one just has create a new calendar, and I separated it because I wanted you to see something. Take a look at the last screen. If you look at this last screen, it says other calendars, but I don't see all my choices, do I? I need to select that small plus sign to the right of other calendars. Then I will see that it's going to drop down these choices. Okay, it's going to drop down these choices. And the choice that I have is create new calendar. a lot of these things will come very smoothly for you as you continue when you're practicing for yourself on this, okay? Okay, this is the busy slide. So this slide has a lot of things, but it's mainly because there's certain things that I hope to highlight and make very clear. Because sometimes when you are working with some of these tools, there are so many options, and the options are wonderful. It's great to have all these options, but sometimes there's so many options that it's hard to keep up, and it can be a little bit frustrating. Okay, so let's take it one step at a time. Let's look at our settings on the calendar. So the first thing I'm going to do is type a calendar name. Now, the reason this is important is because this is business. This is either work or business. Although you can use this for personal, today's focus is either work or business. So the calendar name is going to be something related to work or business. For our example, our practice, it's going to be volunteer. It's going to be a volunteer calendar. But here, I just want to highlight where you go to type the name of the calendar. If you made a mistake, you could always delete the calendar. Again, you can always go back and delete and try again. So here we're typing in our name, and I have that indicated in the nice red box on your screen. Below, you see description. Now, this is adding a description, a location. This becomes much more complex depending on what your business purpose is, okay? So this wouldn't necessarily just be that you're planning a party. We're speaking business purposes for this. So this, in our example, is going to end up being something that has to do with the meeting that I'm having with the team regarding this volunteer calendar for volunteer teams. Okay. You also have, beneath that, you have the time zone. There's many other details listed, but I wanted to highlight things that most often come up when you're scheduling something on this calendar. And this is for work or business purposes. So after you're comfortable with the name of the calendar, the description, the next thing you're going to do is just select the button that says Create Calendar, okay? Okay, and I don't see any questions so far. Feel free to ask them. All right. So again, ours is going to be called Volunteer Calendar, and you'll see that in just a moment. Okay, so I typed in volunteer calendar. That's just the sample. That's an example. That's the name that I chose because of what I'm going to work with my sample team. Here, I put it at the bottom in a circle. I placed a red circle around it because, again, your screen, that's going to look very similar to the one I'm sharing with you, has a lot of choices and a lot of data that comes up, a lot of selections. So I want you to be really clear as to where each thing is located on your screen when you open up your calendar, just because the more familiar you are with all the different parts of a tool, the more quickly you can get things done. And the idea is that these tools that I'm sharing, on a lot of the things that I'm sharing on the workshops in this Grow with Google series, are tools and applications within Google that you have access to with your Google account, but that it makes your processes a lot smoother. So we don't want you to be digging and wondering what to select. That's why we're going through this way. So you see on the left side of your screen where it says My Calendars. So you look down and sure enough, there's Volunteer Calendar. That was the one I wanted to look at. Okay, that's going to be my sample today, is the Volunteer Calendar. But it appears under My Calendars. So here's where I think depending on the kind of work that you do or the plans that you have for what you're working on, the tasks that you're doing, you may very well have multiple calendars. Why? Because in a moment, we're going to talk about sharing your calendar. You may have groups of people where those groups are the different activities or meetings you're going to have with certain groups of people. And those calendars might be dedicated, a calendar dedicated to each group. It all depends on what your plans are and what you're working on. Okay? These are just options. I want to give you options and know that there's so many things to choose from that you don't have to think, oh, well, my business is much more complex than this, or I have a larger team, and some of them come to meetings and some do not. And that's okay. You can have multiple calendars. That's the good thing about this. And those calendars will be displayed here beneath the section of my calendars. Okay. So when you're looking at your calendar, it's naturally going to default to week. So here on your screen, where I've shared it with you, where you see month highlighted, it defaults to week. I highly recommend that you switch and select, and with your choices, you're going to go to month, okay, with your calendar. From time to time, you may want to look at the week, but you would want the typical setting to be by the month. And as you see here on your screen, you can either choose to show weekends, Saturday, Sunday, or not. Some may have reasons why they'd prefer to just see Monday through Friday. Others who are using this for business purposes might want the full week to be visible on the calendar. That's entirely up to you. Now, here on the screen, see, I have my little graphic going simply because I want you to have the opportunity to walk, and I'm going to let this run for a little bit because I want you to see what happens when you make these changes. First, you find the date and see how the little graphic selected January 11th. There it goes again. This is repeating. It's going through it again and again. See, they decided to call it meeting for group. When you name the event, they called it a meeting for group on this sample. You select a start time and an end time. And that's what this little graphic is doing. It's selecting the date first. Then here, as you see on your screen, it's automatically typing the name of the event. And then the next thing it does is it adds the time, the start time, and the end time of the event. In this case, it is also an event that happens to be a meeting. The other thing you're going to do is add a description. And you see that that's a choice in the menu. Even on my graphic, it's a choice in the menu. Then the other thing that you're going to do is save and share. And we're going to walk through that in just a moment. What I wanted you to have the chance to do, even today, to see it visually in the workshop, was watching it happen on your screen. You're watching it happen with a sample name of event, meeting for group, a sample day and time. And I wanted you to get a chance to kind of look at that and see how that works. Right. And again, these steps, I'm going to go through them in a little more detail in just a moment. I just want you to get an idea of the things we're going to look at. Okay. So one of the things you can do in a description, we're going to talk a little bit more about a description. Remember, this is a meeting. In this sample, this is a meeting. You may choose to add the agenda to the meeting. So there's so many things that are going to depend on what it is that you want to do. It's going to be entirely up to you, the things that you add to your calendar. Moving forward, you're going to see that not only do you create the calendar at an event. Ours is going to be a sample meeting, but also you're going to share the calendar. And you're going to do even beyond that. So that's why you're wanting to keep in mind, oh, am I sharing this? Am I sharing this with a colleague or an employee that is going to be at that meeting, the sample meeting, this schedule that I'm placing on my calendar? And if they are going to be there, would it be very beneficial to type a little agenda and make sure they have it before they get to the meeting? This is something to think about, because these are some of your options. And this, again, is what is designed to make this process smooth, a smooth process that helps you save time, because all of us have much to do, and anything that can save time, particularly things that are free of cost, that can save you a significant amount of time, then they're very beneficial, be it in your personal life or, in this case, as we're speaking, your business life. Okay? So let's look at this in a little more detail. Okay, so I decided that the sample, as I mentioned earlier, was going to be a volunteer calendar. Okay, it has to do with volunteer. It's a volunteer meeting, and in my real sample, it's going to have to do with a group that addresses those who act as volunteers for our business or organization. So here, you're going to select your group calendar. So remember, under my calendars, you had choices. So you're going to select the group calendar. Okay, and there's a lot on this screen too, so we're going to look at it one step at a time, because we're going to pause for just a moment. Remember, we adding an event, make sure if this is a business event, it does not go on a personal calendar. Because now we're taking the steps toward sharing this calendar with others. So just be sure that the calendar that we're working with, the data that we're working with, is the data that you want, and that it's not something personal unless you were working on a personal task and that you wanted to share that personal calendar with others, okay? So for these purposes, this is a calendar that I'm ready to share with my colleagues. So I found, yes, there I see my volunteer calendar, and it's on your screen. Now, once again, these 3 dots are for options. And I have that highlighted with the red box more toward the center of the screen that I'm sharing with you. And what those 3 dots are my options for the volunteer calendar. So you can have multiple calendars, but when you look to the right of your calendar and you see that series of 3 dots, then those are your options. And when you have many calendars, that's where you have to maybe slow down a little bit and not be in too much of a rush, and just make sure you're selecting the calendar that you intended to select, okay? A little bit below that, I'm showing where it says settings and sharing. So options for my volunteer calendar. And then I'm going to select those 3 dots, which are my options, and then it's going to give me the options. And I want to go to settings and sharing. Settings and sharing. What I have actually done also with all of these Google tools, many probably already noticed this, but when they update tools, the visual, the screen may look a little bit different. That's why the images you're seeing now, I made sure they were current as of today. So logging into my Grow with Google Partner account as of today, and the current look of the screen for Google, these are up to date, because sometimes the images change a little bit, so these are up to date. So I decided, okay, I want to go to settings and sharing, settings and sharing. And I will keep reminding you that you are free to type in any questions you may have. If you choose to wait until the end of the workshop to type in your questions, that's perfect. If you choose to do it prior to the end, that's perfect too. Okay, lots more on this screen. So here, I know on each screen at the very top, I've placed share the calendar, but it's just that these are the steps we're going to take to share the calendar. So here, we're going to take a look at what your screen would look like, very, very similar. Just the names would be different, but it would be very similar. So here's where you're going to share with specific people. What that means is just, who am I sharing with? And what are their email addresses? Because that's what we're going to be working with. Here is where I decide, who do I want to share this with? Because as I move forward a bit, I'm going to show you some details about sharing, some details. But at this point, once I start entering these email addresses and then I save it, then those are the people that are actually going to receive access to view this calendar. So think about the calendar. Think about what it is you're sharing. What is the event you're going to share? What does this have to do with? But here, this is not specific to an event. This is specific to the calendar. So for my example, I would be thinking, okay, this volunteer calendar, who should be seeing it? I may give some viewers, some of my colleagues, some of the people, I might give them more choices, but they're still going to be able to see it. Everybody's going to be able to see it once I share it with them. Some will have extra things they can do with it, what we call permissions, permission to do more, but everybody's going to be able to see it if I'm sharing it. So that's why it's important to think about, who do you want to be on this list of those that are sharing with you and being able to see this calendar of yours. And this here, where it says add people, where the arrow points to add people with the plus sign there, that's where you're entering the email addresses. Some of them may already be saved in your account, very likely, but some may not be saved in your list of contacts. Some of these may be lists of people that are new to add. So this is just where you want to keep in mind, who shall I add to receive and share access to this calendar? Okay, so let's go. Here we go. Now it says, I'm still talking about sharing the calendar. We're still in the same concept. We're just getting some more details. So now we're looking at permissions. What is this person permitted to do with the calendar I'm sharing with them? And when you start getting a lot of tasks going on at the same time, again, you have a very busy day, there's so many things going on, you're adding all these people, or even just a few people, stop for just a minute and think. You're adding the email or the name of the person with their email. Now I want to see, what am I going to give them freedom to do with this calendar? Okay, those are the permission settings. What are you allowed to do? What are you permitted to do once I share this with you? So here's an example. I have come and thought, okay, what do I want to allow this person to do? In this case, let's look at the choices. What are my choices? I want them to see only free or busy. Like, okay, so basically I'm hiding all the details from this person. But then I might think, oh, okay, I want them to see all the details. Now here it says see all event details. The event could be any event anything that is taking place that you placed on your calendar. Our sample is a meeting. So in this case, but this is where I want them to see all event details. So this person is going to be permitted to or have permission to see all event details. They're seeing the calendar. So if I give them access to see all the details, they're seeing all of it. What happens on Monday, what happens on Wednesday, Friday at 2 o'clock, they're seeing all the details once they select the event. That's where you're thinking about what do you want this person to have access to see. Then beneath that on your screen, take a look, another choice. Another choice is that person is allowed not just to see the event, the meeting, for example, but they're allowed to make changes to it. Okay, they're allowed to make changes to it. So this is where you need to just really think through this process. Okay, they're going to be allowed to go in, see the calendar, you're sharing it with them. They can select an event and then they can change something in that event. Okay, then the last one is make changes and manage sharing. A little bit later, we'll talk a little bit about that. Really, only one person should be sharing, posting an event and then sharing, because things can get rather confusing, okay, when it comes to everyone having access to a calendar, access to an event, and then making all kinds of changes. So you're going to want to think about, that's part of your plan, who is going to start managing the sharing of this calendar, okay? You just got to think through those steps as part of your plan with this calendar, because this, again, this can start to get this will get much more complex depending on what it is that you want to do with this calendar. Because if our sample is a meeting and everyone can start making changes and manage the calendar, there could be 3 and 4 changes and it can start to get very confusing. So you'll want to limit how many people are going to manage that sharing of the calendar. Typically, you do want those that are sharing for these purposes, especially work purposes, you're going to want them to see the details on the calendar, because again, it's usually meetings, events, something relating to a work team. Okay, so then here in this sample, I decided to add an additional event. So what if you have a list of meetings? Or perhaps you have meetings and events planned. You've got a task list going and it needs to go on this calendar. Well, you would do this one at a time. You're going to place them on your calendar one at a time, but this is just an example for you to visually see, take a look and see. In this example, I just called it volunteer meeting 2, okay? And because this is very current, I made these particular slides current so you could visually see it in something that you could kind of relate to it. The date on this volunteer meeting 2 is actually for today, Wednesday, March 31st. I put it 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Here, also beneath the date, you see where it says does not repeat. You also have the option to make this a recurring meeting. But for our purposes, we just want to get comfortable with this particular tool, this Google Calendar within Gmail. So we're just not making it repeating for this workshop example. And now, what if I want to add group members? This is where I can do it, where it says add guests. These are the people that I'm going to add so that they can know that this is coming up. This is later in this workshop. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you what it looks like when someone sends you an invitation, or there's an invitation in your Gmail inbox letting you know, hey, this event's going on, this meeting is going on, let's take some action to decide whether we want to attend or not, and makes a notification that we're going to be there or not. Okay. And I so far don't see any questions. Again, feel free to ask questions. So I use the example of a meeting. This could be any type of event, any type of event. You could have a luncheon going on that you could have a business luncheon. It would be the same principle, the same, just different things and information that you're going to want to include, but the steps would be the same. Okay, so now here's what you can, if you choose, and I have many browser tabs open on my screen at any given time, but you can open a separate tab. You can open a separate browser because you're already logged in. Just make sure it's Google Chrome and you will be logged in. And you don't have to do that, but it's easier sometimes so you can see multiple things at once. So here's what you're going to do though. Either way, regardless of what you choose, if you do not want to open another browser window, I recommend it. But what's going to happen now is I am going to go back to my apps launcher, my 9 dots at the upper right-hand corner of my screen. But this time, I was previously selected calendar. Right now, I want to select Gmail. Remember, you can go from one app, one tool to another, back and forth, open different browser windows as long as you're logged in to Google Chrome. And you use Google Chrome for the ease of use. And then as long as you're logged into your Google account, then you can open up separate windows just to keep things a little bit more organized. So in this new window, I went to my apps launcher, my 9 dots, and I select Gmail. The reason I was sharing with you is the icon, the image of Gmail is not exactly as it was back in the past. It's a little bit different and very, very similar. But either way, every tool is listed. Every tool is listed and you can go back and forth between apps as you like. Okay, lots going on this screen here, right? The important thing is I've opened up my Gmail, so I'm there. Now, what happened is one of my teammates has sent me an invitation. So it's in my inbox, as you can see on my screen, and it's a meeting for group. So I have received an invitation. I need to open it and decide what I want to do. So more toward the center of your screen, the screen that I'm sharing with you, you see where I selected my invitation and it's giving me these options. It opens up this screen here. It says invitation meeting for group on Saturday, January 11th, and it gives me those details. However, it also gives me some choices. I can accept the invitation with a yes. I can show that I'm uncertain with a maybe, or I can decline the invitation with a no. Just keep in mind that if you don't say the yes or the no and you leave it at a maybe, then it leaves doubt as to whether you're going to be there or not. You can always come back and say, yes, I am going to be at that meeting. Depending on what it is, if it's for business purposes, if there are people waiting to know whether you're going to attend, I would keep those details in mind when you place the maybe. But those choices are there for you. Again, it gives you a little bit of detail. Your calendar, we're focusing on the inbox of Gmail, but remember your calendar is the great tool. because it's there for you to organize and keep up with everything you have going on in your day, your week, your month. And as a matter of fact, it really is your year if you want to tab over from month to month. But this is a great tool because you can look, and unlike my sample for this workshop, you can have your calendar filled with meetings and events, and you can monitor and see. If you do this in an organized way like this, then you can see what you have coming up and be able to keep up with it. And then maybe come back and say, well, I'm not ready to respond to this one today. Just make sure you do either say yes, maybe, or no at some point, because then the individual sending it to you is probably waiting for a response. But just because you open the invitation doesn't mean you immediately must give them a response. It's just if you have many invitations, then you may want to really keep up with those if you skip and don't respond at all yet. Okay? So here, okay, now we're going to look at something. In the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and look at creating a new message, creating a brand new message in Gmail. And what does that look like? Some of you may have other applications for your emails. Some of you may be very familiar with Gmail. It really, really depends. And this workshop, you will be notified, or it will be posted when it's available on the Fort Worth Public Library YouTube channel. So at some point it'll become available, and others may be watching this workshop and they may be more or less familiar with Gmail. That's why it's important to address all the details, because not everyone has a Gmail account. And it's important to know, if you do not have a Google account, then you can't access the tools. The Google account, it doesn't ask very many questions. It's pretty user-friendly, and it's free of cost. But you don't have to have a Gmail account. You don't have to use your Gmail, rather, but you have to have a Google account in order to work through these tools and these applications. Okay, here we are with our new Gmail, and we want to compose a new email. So what we're going to do is we're going to come here and very well go to compose, and we're going to select compose. Okay, here we are. So here are some things that sometimes there are those who do a lot of emailing, if you will. They do a lot of emailing, but they don't necessarily use all the choices, or they're not really familiar with what all the choices mean and how those choices might be helpful. So there's something that you may be very familiar with, but I do want to highlight. Here, yes, in the very beginning of my new message that I compose, I made my new message, it's the to, which is the recipient, who's going to receive this. And that's where I'm going to type in the email address of this person. But over to the right, I used my red box to select CC and BCC. So CC, carbon copy. Many of you use that quite often. It is to send an additional person, a carbon copy of this email. However, there's BCC, blind carbon copy. With blind carbon copy, and this can sometimes be very important with business. Blind carbon copy means that you, the sender of the email, you can see who you sent, who's receiving this email. But those that receive the email, be it 2 people, 4 people, 100 people, they cannot see each other's emails and they cannot see each other's names. So that's what blind carbon copy is, and that is, I've used it very often when the recipients are multiple people who, for privacy reasons or other reasons, I'm not going to share their email addresses. I want them all to receive it, and that's great, but I don't want to make everyone's email address visible to each other. And that's where blind carbon copy can come in very useful, particularly for business purposes. So that's an important element to know. That's an important tool within your email options. And then there's subject. Sometimes you'll have emails come without a subject, and perhaps if you only send an occasional email, maybe once a month or something, but particularly if it's business purposes, you really need to have a subject in your emails. And the sub short, but exactly that ties into the content of your email as far as business is concerned. And then, yes, you're going to type your message. One other thing that people will use quite often, and that is the spell check. Spell check is available, and I do not want us to run out of time. Spell check is available by selecting the 3 dots once again, and that's spell check. And one of the last features we're going to look at is the Gmail signature. Gmail signature is an email signature where this way you do not have to type your signature every single time. And signature is really your name, your title, and a lot of times it's going to have, it's going to include whatever you like on your signature. But also on your screen, you're going to take a look, because in Gmail, when you want to select the signature, you go to settings, and then it's going to give you many choices. So you're going to go down, scroll down until you see, just like you're seeing on my screen here that I'm sharing with you, where it says signature. I have the red box around it. Mine, no signatures yet. And I would select create new so that we can have a new signatures. This is very useful, because once you type your contact information and you save that signature setting, it's going to be what it has here appended. It's going to come at the bottom of your email message every single time. So you don't have to start typing it every time. You don't have to copy and paste it every time. It's automatically going to be included. But you can have multiple signatures. You don't have to have just one signature and that's it. You can have different styles. Maybe you put out a couple of signatures and then you use one and most of the time, and other signatures other times. It's not so much that you would change your name, but more that you might add more details to your signature, more information. A lot of times people will add little logos of their company or their business at the bottom of their signature. All these choices are available to you. And so just to recap what we've done, and I don't see any questions. I don't see any questions at all. Recapping what we've done, we went through Google Calendar, we created, shared, and then we added a new event on Google Calendar. And we were able, within Gmail, we were able to receive and accept invitations. We created the email signature. We composed a new email, and then we see how you reply to an email. For our example was an invitation on how you reply, but those are the same steps. Now, again, I don't see any questions, but I will share with you one important thing for those of you participating today. When you're finished, the last screen is going to be a survey or an evaluation. I ask that you please fill that out. And that way you can share with us at Fort Worth Public Library Adult Services Programming. You can share your input. Your input is essential as we continue to roll out programs and workshops and classes for adults. Each time you attend a particular program, your input is very valuable. So that screen will display as soon as we finish with this workshop. And keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, the email that you use to register, you will receive in the next couple of days. You will receive the handouts, which is those are the slides that you've been seeing throughout this entire workshop. And also, when available, it will be posted as a recording, as a video recording on the Fort Worth Public Library YouTube channel. And before we go, I want to make sure, again, I don't see any questions or comments. I don't see any questions or comments. And, oh, thank you, Jeanette. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Jeanette. Also, just a reminder that I really appreciate Alexis Carter has been supporting this Q&A, and I thank you all so much for attending. And also just keep an eye out on our Fort Worth Public Library website and social media channels so that you can see all the different offers that we have as far as programming and services. And also, don't forget, you are already registered for the last workshop, the last of the 4 workshops in the Grow with Google series. The last one will be Collaborate, Work, and Meet Remotely. And lots of tips on how to do that most effectively. Again, I thank you so much. Thank you for spending some of your afternoon with us. And I hope that you can go and enjoy using some of these tools. And we really appreciate your participation so very much. We thank you now, and we look forward to a great afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone.